Good evening and welcome. My name is April Mason and I have the privilege of serving as the Senior Vice President and Provost of Kansas State University, and I want to welcome each and every one of you to the 164th Landon Lecture on Public Affairs. The Landon Lectures were begun in 1966 by the late Governor Alf Landon and the late Kansas State University President James McCain. The goal of the series is to bring the most prominent thought leaders to Kansas State University to discuss issues of the day, and we're very pleased to welcome John Skipper, President of ESPN, Bob Bowlsby, Big 12 Conference Commissioner, DeLoss Dodds, retiring athletic director at the University of Texas and former athletic director and track coach here at Kansas State University, along with Kirk Schulz, president of Kansas State University, to the Landon stage to join the 163 previous speaker sets, bringing their thoughts and opinions on public issues. Before we begin our formal program, I'd like to introduce the following special guests in our audience this evening. As I say your name, will you please stand and remain standing until we can acknowledge you? Dr. Andy Tompkins, President and CEO of the Kansas Board of Regents, and former Regent Dan Likens. The lights are such that you may be standing. I don't see you. There they are. All right. And Dan Likens, former Regent. Would you help me in recognizing these gentlemen? Next, I'd like to introduce a number of individuals who are guests with us this evening. And again, as I say your name, would you stand and remain standing? I'd like to introduce Dr. Noel Schulz, Kansas State University First Lady and Associate Dean for Research and Graduate Programs in the College of Engineering. Dr. Jackie Hartman, Chair of the Landon Lecture Series and Chief of Staff in the Office of the President. Shelley Broccolo, Landon Event Coordinator. Dr. Julia Keene, President, Faculty Senate, and Associate Professor in Architectural Engineering and Construction Science. Jan Taggart, President, Classified Staff, Senate. Eli Schooley, Kansas State University Student Body President, for 8 more days. He's also a senior in political science, and his cohort in crime, Mr. Jake Unruh, K-State Student Body Vice President and senior in finance. Would you help me in recognizing each of these individuals? Two seniors that we don't want to graduate. We're so happy for them, but we don't want them to leave. Tonight, we're really very pleased to welcome one of the most prominent figures in American sports media and 3 leaders in collegiate athletics to our Landon panel. This panel will undoubtedly bring insight, challenge us to question, and help guide Kansas State University to balance its interconnectivity between athletics, academics, and student life at Kansas State. So without further ado, let me introduce our panelists to you. Mr. John Skipper is president of ESPN Inc. and co-chairman of Disney Media Networks. Since 2012, he has boosted ESPN's stature in both the broadcast and digital media landscapes. In 1998, he helped launch ESPN, the magazine, and prior to ESPN, Mr. Skipper oversaw all magazine, book, and licensed publishing operations in the U.S. for the Disney Publishing Group. He began his career as president and publishing director for Spin magazine. I think you'll agree he's had a very interesting career. Would you join me in welcoming Mr. John Skipper? I understand many of our students had the opportunity to interact with Mr. Skipper this afternoon. What a wonderful opportunity. To guide us through our discussion this evening is a leader in athletics from our own university. Mr. John Currie joined the Kansas State University family in 2009 as Director of Athletics. In the past 5 years, our athletics program has enjoyed an unprecedented combination of athletic, academic, administrative accomplishments, and national attention, including a record-setting year in 2012-2013. Who can forget 3 Big 12 championships in 1 academic year? What's more important than that is Mr. Currie shows integrity and accountability as a leader in forming a model intercollegiate athletics program. Turning this over to John this evening, please welcome tonight's moderator, John Currie, who will further introduce our panelists this evening. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Mason. It's an honor and pleasure to introduce our 3 additional panel guests. First, to my right, Commissioner Bob Bowlsby is a man you're familiar with as a leader of our conference who has led the Big 12 into a new era of stability and growth. He's the reason we're able to watch the Cats and other Big 12 games on some of the biggest primetime networks. After 3 decades as an athletics director at Stanford, Iowa, and Northern Iowa, he was named Big 12 Commissioner in 2012. Since then, he finalized the Big 12 SEC Sugar Bowl Pact, has seen 3 national championships added to the Big 12 trophy case, and has witnessed 12 individuals earn NCAA crowns. Please welcome Big 12 Commissioner Bob Bowlsby. It's great to welcome back our next panelist to Kansas State. For the past 32 years, DeLoss Dodds has been the athletics director for the University of Texas before retiring in November of 2013. Some of you, most of you, may know that before DeLoss was a Longhorn, he was a Wildcat, and he is a 1959 graduate. For 19 years, he worked at Kansas State as head track coach and later in my job as athletics director. In fact, DeLoss's executive assistant, Rita Bath, was still in her same position when I arrived 9 athletic directors after DeLoss. DeLoss is a native of Riley, Kansas. Let's please welcome DeLoss Dodds home. Last and certainly not least, because he's my boss, Kansas State University President Kirk Schulz. And if you follow him as @KState_Prez or talk with him for 5 minutes, you'll know that Kansas State is on its way to becoming a top 50 public research university by 2025. One of the goals for his vision, K-State 2025, is about preparing student athletes for success in school, in sports, and after graduation, an aspiration in which I am proud to partner with President Schulz. Please welcome President Kirk Schulz.
The mood lighting.
Didn't pay the bills.
You changed the way the world thinks about you. Big plays tonight. Everything you put into this thing, everything you sunk into this is 3 hours away. Let's go win it. Let's go. Let's get this game away.
This is a day they are never, ever going to forget.
Now it's time to deliver.
Chalmers, Cole, James! Whoa!
Takes the catch. Touchdown Beavers.
In sports, hello, Sports Center Top 10.
Every night there's a winner.
For maybe the win.
Denzel. They'll never catch him.
They fight hard.
Puts it up. Bang! From downtown. Amazing.
Right center field.
It's gone. It's into the bullpen.
And every season a champion.
Connecticut brings the title back in 2013.
These are the men,
The women.
the teams who fight,
Push.
Dive.
And do whatever it takes.
To be the best.
Because every day is game day.
These guys get it, man. They play hard, they play physical, they want to hit you in the mouth.
When did you know you could be big time?
Champions work harder than everyone else.
The effort you put in, the way you fight,
That's what makes you great.
Expectations are meant to be surpassed.
Davis! Oh my God! Davis is going to run it all the way back! Auburn's going to win the football game!
Que viva Cuba! Viva Pui!
There's the record. Peyton Manning's 51st touchdown pass.
They raised their game to new heights.
So that's the signature moment.
That is what it's about. History being made.
You've got the two hottest teams playing.
Florida State rules the BCS.
You know you're watching something special you may never see again.
The 2013 NBA championship resides once again in Miami.
Champions.
Put teamwork first.
What we can do as a team and as a group is pretty special.
When many people doubted us, we came together as a group.
Champions.
Start strong.
And they finish stronger.
We have a new saying in Boston. Boston strong, baby.
At ESPN.
At ESPN.
At ESPN. Every day.
You have just witnessed history.
Every day.
Oh my! Would you believe it?
Every day.
This is what's good about sports.
At ESPN.
Every day.
It's game day.
An unbelievable finish! Who is writing this stuff?
Good evening once again. We're going to get started now, and we'll have an interactive discussion and some questions here. I expect, knowing these folks, that they're not going to hold back in the challenge.
I've been in negotiations with all of them, and they never hold back so far.
We got you surrounded now, and then later on in the program, there'll be a time for the audience to ask questions. So, Mr. Skipper, ESPN is now a household word. Athletes want to be in a top 10 highlight on SportsCenter. College bands play the theme music. There are restaurants, magazines, multiple channels viewed by over 100 million households. But what is exactly ESPN's mission?
I'll tell you, I have to tell you, I'm reeling a tiny bit because I'm pretty sure I heard somebody say that somebody was president for 8 more days. Okay, that's you, not me, right? Okay. Obviously, any company, at a university, at a conference, among the most important things you need to do is coalesce people around something that is simple to understand and that is inspiring. And at ESPN, our mission is to serve sports fans. That's it. That's what it's been since the company started. We codified it at one point. A couple of years ago, we added to serve sports fans anytime, anywhere, to take into account that it was no longer just about sitting in front of a television set at home and watching in your living room. It might be about watching on your smartphone or your desktop computer. You do know that if you do watch more ESPN at work, you're more productive. We have surveys that prove that. And and we have 7,000 employees, mostly in Bristol, Connecticut, some in New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, Miami, Charlotte, North Carolina, Austin, Texas. And they all understand that that's what we're doing. We're serving sports fans. It actually is quite a helpful way to think about decisions you make. When we think about, are we going to adopt a new technology, the answer is if sports fans like it, we're going to do it. And we've been well served by doing that. You almost said we're a household world, and that's what we want to be. We actually want to be a household world.
That was a softball thrown your way. Yeah. Commissioner Bowlsby, what has ESPN meant to college athletics?
Dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun. Is there anybody in the room that doesn't recognize that? I don't think there's a short answer to that, John, but clearly ESPN has changed the way the world consumes its sports. They did it in presentation. They did it in the way they've grown their family of networks. There seems to be an almost insatiable appetite for additional content, and ESPN has certainly been in the forefront of capturing that content. And I think John gets a lot of the credit for the visionary approach to capturing content. The company under his leadership has aggressively gone after long-time contracts in an era which he and I have talked about on occasion. The likelihood of changing technology in the years ahead is very substantial, and who knows how we'll be consuming our sports in the years ahead. But John knows that having those arrangements and nurturing the relationships is the way to go forward and do business together. And so I think truly when it was the Entertainment Sports Programming Network and no one really knew what that meant, I just think it's astonishing what it's become. And not only has ESPN created its own world, but they have created the world to which every other sports broadcaster aspires. They truly have set the standard for storytelling and for presentation and for multiple platform delivery. And it's a remarkable story and one that is an American story. It has done a lot to define our culture over the last 2 decades.
Just as a point of order, when the commissioner or anybody else refers to John, they're not really talking about me. They're talking about John Skipper. And just figure
we'll
that out.
stipulate when it's you.
Thank you. If it's me, it's going to be Currie or something like that. So John Skipper, to be specific. You know, this is a public affairs and public policy forum and tradition here, and you know the people that have been on the stage in this series. And so when you're talking about public affairs, how does ESPN fit into public affairs?
Well, it's not just how ESPN fits in public affairs, and it is to me, I want to justify being here in this august Landon Lecture. I looked at some of the people who've been here before, so it was a little bit daunting, but I do think that it belongs because sports is very central in American culture right now. I mean, if you think about what people talk about, what matters, how big a business it is, sports is really central. And I have the point of view that in a world in which much of what we're interested in is fragmented and there are no more Billboard 100 charts where everybody listens to the same music, where politics is very polarizing and it's very difficult to bring it up at dinner parties, when people watch different movies and read different books there, and it's not a bad thing, but there is this sort of real fragmentation of our culture. One of the few things people can talk about together is sports. I've had the misfortune of having to go to a lot of focus groups at one point in my career. I try not to go now, but that's where you sit behind a one-way mirror and watch people talk. And I can guarantee that if you bring 8 or 10 guys into a room, guys don't talk to each other very quickly. They're slightly awkward around each other, and they don't quite know whether to say anything. Women talk more quickly in focus groups to each other. Eventually, guys will talk to each other when one guy says to the other one, "Did you see the game last night?" And that's how they start. And it's not trivial because we want common experiences, right? We want things to talk to each other about and ways to bond. It's part of the passion of college sports, right? I've heard 10 or 15 times a day people talk about the K-State family, the Wildcat family, what it means to be here. And I know that one of the things that you coalesce around is Kansas State athletics. People come to the stadium on Saturday, and 50,000 people have a great time there. And that's what sports is about. That's why it's public policy. It also, of course, is intertwined with major state public universities, public funds and financing. And so significant issues of public policy become involved.
So DeLoss, you spent your whole career in college athletics working on behalf of student athletes in higher education. Why are college sports so popular? What makes college sports so unique?
I want to start with something different. I want to.
Go ahead.
I had this same experience in a negotiation.
He's been an AD 4 years. I think I've been an AD 35.
Ouch.
I want to
Ouch.
first.
That was painful.
I know. But I love him. I want to first say hi to Ernie Barrett and Bonnie, two of my favorite people on earth. I was in the Riley Cafe yesterday picking up hamburgers. There were 3 construction workers, a lady from Topeka and a lady from Concordia, sitting at 3 different tables, and all they talked about between the tables was Kansas State. Basketball, NCAA basketball tournament. I mean, it is amazing what sports do. Driving into Bill Snyder Tollway or Boulevard or...
The tollway might be a good idea, by the way.
I'm convinced.
Where does the money go?
But I've got a sister in Louisiana, went to Kansas State, but she has become a Southeast Conference fan I've got a sister in Chicago, Big Ten. She loves Texas and loves Kansas State. But I mean, when an SEC school loses, my sister in Louisiana will not take calls. No specific school. If any school in the SEC loses, she does not take calls. If some school in the SEC goes on probation for huge problems, she says they're just out after that school. I mean, if they lose, it was the officiating. I mean, there is something about sport that turns people on in a way that's a good thing, because you can pick a side, you can win or lose, and winning is important. It's part of us if our team wins, and if we lose, it's part of us if we lose. But I mean, it's something that everybody puts time in, they put money in, right, John? Are you putting in enough to John? It's something that unites people, but the bottom line, the best thing about sport is the kids. Total. It's about the kids. It's about the young men, the young women that participate in the sport, and how much that helps them with their life. It helps them in every way. They can go to college, they get the same experience other students do, but they get the add-on of sport. And that is the best thing about our games. And ESPN is absolutely, John, absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
I can remember 1981 in Austin, Texas, my first year, watching Arizona State play a football game over and over and over on ESPN.
We showed the same game over and over. Yeah. This year, DeLoss, this year we did 1,700 basketball games and 400 college football games.
Wow.
And you were talking about just literally how it's changed. I'm interested to look out at the audience because we have people of several generations. Those of you in my generation will remember when there was a single football game on Saturday. And now every Kansas State game is on. And almost every game of every major university is on now.
And there are people that thought overexposure would hurt the sport, and that has not happened. Overexposure has helped the sport.
So now that we've established from the first three panelists that everything's pretty much perfect in the world of sports and college television, let's shift over to President Schulz because he's part of the NCAA governance that makes everything so wonderful. And President Schulz, you were part of a 7-member presidential task force attempting to reorganize NCAA governance and the structure. And television affects all the members of the NCAA. Television revenue is more significant for a fewer number of members of the NCAA. So how does ESPN and television enter into those conversations you all are having right now?
Well, I think it involves the NCAA in several ways. One, certainly the dollars that come from all of those games being on and the dollars that come into the conference, I think raises the visibility of college athletics overall. But then when the media networks now talk about NCAA issues, I think there's some number of years ago where you'd have to really be an interested fan or it'd have to just affect your particular institution. And I think today there's a lot of folks out there that have opinions on the NCAA, and I think that's good. I think we want college sports to be a great competition, move student athletes through school, help them to have great, wonderful careers. I think the NCAA ad that really reinforces that the vast majority of student athletes are not going into professional sports is one of the best things that the NCAA has done. That being said, we have to make sure that we structure the NCAA so that we do a great job of working with college sports and making sure that we look out for student-athlete well-being. At the end of the day, we get worried about how much somebody can eat and how much we can spend and what we're doing, but really what the purpose of the NCAA is and what we're trying to do through the reform process is focus on, are we doing what we need to protect and to help the student-athlete? And I think we have to sort of remember that. So I welcome the engagement and involvement. I think it's important for the media to continue to be talking out there, involved and engaged with what we're doing to the NCAA. And I think it forces us to also be accountable because, somebody's out there going to ask you a question. And if you don't have a reasonable answer to that or you say we're going to hide behind a rule book, I don't think that's what the media world of today, where there's a lot of immediate kinds of responses on Twitter and Facebook and social media, really do affect a lot of this. So we're going to get it right. We're going to make the NCAA something that I hope people will be proud of. And otherwise, I'm going to die trying. So anyway, the commissioner called me, said, Kirk, this will only take you a couple hours. And I'm not taking a call from the commissioner again, I can tell you. But we're going to get it right, and we're going to make it so that we continue to take college athletics and continue to make it bigger and better for the country.
So we've got a number of our student athletes at Kansas State and students at Kansas State here, student leaders who spend an enormous amount of extracurricular time on their activities, and some student athletes. I see our 2012 Big 12 Basketball Coach of the Year, Bruce Weber, and his wife Megan here. Commissioner, we're got all these great things from ESPN and the exposure and a few dollars and all that kind of stuff, but how do we continue to provide great content for this partner without continuing commercialization or disrupting the academic lives further of our student athletes?
Well, the interesting thing about the disruption aspects of the student-athlete experience is that in many ways, modern modes of transportation has made it so many of our high-profile student-athletes, especially in football, they're not gone from campus very much. Student football athletes, they miss part of a Friday, and that's about it. And there really aren't very many accommodations that are made in those sports for television purposes. Interestingly enough, when I was at Stanford, I was involved in the early stages of the Pac-12 network, and one of the things that everybody wanted was soccer wanted to be on TV, water polo wanted to be on TV, lacrosse wanted to be on television. They all wanted to be on television, but they all wanted to still play at 7 o'clock on Friday night. And there are some accommodations that need to be made, and scheduling is one of those things. And so we have lots of academic support. We have lots of things that are supportive of student athletes that, quite frankly, are available to them as a result of the revenue that's derived from our television partnerships and our media partnerships. And so there are some good elements to what we do, and most of them are highly positive, but there can sometimes be some additional missed class time. There can be some travel that was unanticipated. I think that we have evolved over time, but I think that the vast majority of change that has taken place as a result of expanded media is highly positive. And there's always lots of comments about, well, television is driving this decision or television is driving that decision. And I have to tell you that in my 3 decades in the business, I haven't ever had a television partner or any other media partner say that we should do one thing or we should do another. I think they express their opinions and we express ours, and there's some pushing and shoving that's involved. But indeed, they really are partnerships. And I don't ever have to ask John Skipper if he cares about the education of our student athletes, because he understands that side of the business, and so does his staff. He may come to us with a specific need and say, gee, we really need your help on this, and this is how we might be able to broker a deal. But to say that they're ever in a situation where their barking orders are driving the agenda is just not accurate. It really is a partnership, and those of us that are on the institutional side of that partnership spend a lot of time making sure that the right decisions are made for student athletes, because it is about getting an education, and it is about some other things as well. If a student athlete can have the opportunity to go on to a professional career or can have an opportunity to participate in the Olympics, those are highly desirable byproducts of a quality collegiate athletics experience. And that collegiate athletics experience certainly includes a solid emphasis on the academic side of it. And so we very much view ESPN and our other media partners as just that. They are partners in an enterprise that we try and expose as widely as we can, and that we try and derive revenue. We try and bring some business thinking to it, but in the end, we never want to lose track of the fact that we're involved in higher education. And I'm really quite confident that John and his colleagues at ESPN and some of the other media companies that we work with are very mindful of that fact.
Okay, so what you just said is that ESPN is not necessarily driving the agenda, right? So you've got to look at you, John Skipper, and we went through this period of time over the last 4 or 5 years. We had some pretty significant realignment issues, and Kansas State's emerged in a terrific place in the Big 12, but we certainly experienced our league as much as anybody. So popular sentiment from some may be counter to what the commissioner is, and there may be said, and there may be popular sentiment that ESPN and television drove or manipulated conference realignment. So what's your view on that?
We don't have any direct responsibility for schools moving. The only thing you could lay on ESPN is we've increased, because the product is valuable, we've increased the amount of money we put into that. And because of the sequencing of college conference deals, that means that sometimes some conferences are receiving more money than other conferences. But no decisions about schools moving are made by us, nor do we ever suggest to a school that they should move or to a conference that they should bring somebody in. It is generally not good for us when schools move around. We have deals with all of the major conferences, and so we are, at some point in time, are paying every school. So when the Big 10, Big 12, this is all confusing mathematics, of course. I can't believe we're in higher education.
We're very confused.
Yeah. When the Big 12 became 10 schools, this is with Bob's predecessor, we agreed to pay the same money for 10 schools as 12 schools. Well, that was not a desirable financial outcome for us, but it helped keep the conference together, which was a desirable outcome. So we are engaged in the discussion, but that wasn't a good move for us. And by the way, when those schools moved to another conference, we paid those conferences more money. So we got to pay everybody more money was a direct result. I will stipulate very strongly here, we like the status quo. We like where they are now, and if nobody wanted to move, we'd be happy. This is like musical chairs. Everybody has a seat right now. I'd like to stay seated, and I'd like everybody else to stay seated, because we like the traditional rivalries. We like what happens in these conferences. We love our relationship with the Big 12 and the Big 10 and the Pac-12 and the SEC and the ACC and on down. We have relationships with 32 different conferences. But I can state categorically, we are not we had no intention of starting any chain reaction of schools moving, nor did we take any direct actions to do so. And I'm not looking to have this be semantic, that we took indirect actions. I'm only trying to own up to the fact that our exposing more schools, bringing more money into it, does create a bit of a competition. Schools want to get better exposure. They want to get more money. They want to build new stadiums, and many of those things are good. When Bob was talking about trade-offs around, all of these things ultimately come down to there are benefits that derive from your media partner, and that's exposure and money. And then you have to decide whether we don't want you to compromise on things that matter. We want to have a balance. Exposure is a good thing. We were talking earlier, President Schulz, because you were at Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech very deliberately used Thursday night to grow their program. They wanted to have an important athletic program, and they used athletics to some extent to transform their university, to raise money, to make people feel good about the university. I would say the net of that is unbelievably positive. I think that happens here. I mean, again, you and I were talking a little bit. I won't reveal anything. You hit me here on the table, but you were talking about the duties of fundraising and the issue of funds from the state, which I also understand. There are fiscal responsibilities of the state here, but Kansas State being on television is a good thing. It energizes your alums. I suspect fundraising goes up in a winning year. I find that often to be the case at many schools. There was a long series in the New York Times about Louisville and how Louisville used athletics to build a stadium and build dormitories and raise teachers' salaries and provide more athletic scholarships for female athletes. Those are all good outcomes of this. However, that doesn't mean we won't have interesting things to talk about. Anytime there is significant competition, money, there will be some temptation by some people to work outside the system, to do things that aren't wrong. And the worst thing going on right now, I do not think it to be happening here. I'm very impressed. Today is the first time I've met John, and you are in the hands of an outstanding athletic director. But where students are not student athletes, there's a problem. Where there are athletes who are not going to school or not going to class, it's a problem. Where there are athletes taking all their classes online, that's probably a problem. Where there's a Northwestern quarterback, I'm only stating what he said, who is told not to take a chemistry class because it'll interfere with football practice, that's a problem. And again, we don't have direct involvement in all that, but we are at the center to some extent of the swirl of college sports, and that's where we want to be. We love it, and we think it's overwhelmingly good. Sorry about that speech.
I should interject that I have a meeting with some of Mr. Skipper's staff on Saturday, and he took this opportunity to remind me that he's already paid us for some members that left the league. So I think that's probably a precursor to me not asking for too much on Saturday.
So, President Schulz, what's your thoughts on these comments?
Well, John, you and I were very involved with all the conference reshuffling and things like that, and you know, at the end of the day, it was an interesting process because ultimately every school is trying to look out for what they think is going to put them and position them most effectively for financial reasons, the fan base, and things like that. I think during the frenzy of people moving around, though, we had a couple things that were sort of lost. I think the good thing is everybody has more resources, not everybody, but most people have more resources for travel and things like that. And so I think my biggest disappointment in the conference reshuffling is some of the really historical, long-term rivalry type things on states that are contiguous that sort of got lost in the shuffle. And I hope, you know, 5 years down the road that some of those things can start up again, even though we might be in different areas, because I do think our fans like to see live games. And it's a lot easier to hop in the car and be able to drive 2 or 3 hours somewhere than sometimes have to fly a long, long ways. And so I think that was a disappointment that came out of there. But like John Skipper said, I'm glad it's done. Hopefully that chapter is done, and we can sort of move on with our new partners and continue to do great things. The one other thing, though, that I do want to mention is we talk about student athletes and all these opportunities and things. We put tremendous there are tremendous demands on our student athletes. We basically say you're going to go to college, you're going to get a degree in something, which is a complete full-time job. Takes a lot of time, particularly in many majors, which are very, very demanding. On top of that, then we add essentially a second full-time type of deal that when you're competing, you got certain things you have to do. When it's off-season, you got certain things you have to do. And really, those students benefit a lot from what they get from intercollegiate athletics and getting a degree, but they also lose some of the collegiate experience because we keep them so busy. So I do think it's a great environment. We have wonderful facilities, great coaches, lots of exposure. But I do think our student athletes, all of us, there is a great deal of time commitment they have to make to really perform at that high level, and that exposure, I think, makes that a lot different.
So what should we change from a student-athlete welfare standpoint as it relates to some of those issues? Commissioner?
Well, I think there's a lot that's right about the enterprise. I really do. I think the marriage of higher education and a student-athlete avocation is a good one that's served us well over a long period of time. There are some very positive things. Graduation rates in college football and college basketball are the highest they've ever been right now. It's a positive message that's largely lost in the noise. But there are also a lot of things that aren't right, things that we need to make improvement on, things that we've identified that we would like to pursue and haven't been able to get the necessary support within Division I in order to do that. There's been lots written and lots of media coverage about autonomy for the 5 conferences, the Big 12 and the ACC, Big 10, Pac-12, and SEC. Those 65 schools win more than 90% of the NCAA championships annually. We bring probably 95% of the financial equity to the environment. You frequently see them on John's networks and on the others that carry sports, and we bring a lot of value. And I think as a result, we have some things that are important to us that may not be important or may not be attainable for the other 285 schools that are in Division I. So it's difficult to paint that environment with a broad brush, and that's what we've sought to do. We've sought to legislate and manage college athletics based upon competitive equity. And I'm not sure that that's reasonable. I'm not sure that we are all the same. In addition to all of the equity aspects and competitive aspects that I mentioned, it's also appropriate to mention that about 80% of the major violations of NCAA rules occur in those 65 schools. There's an enormously competitive environment that is in play there, and not everybody's doing it the right way. Our national organization, when it comes to enforcement, is, in my opinion, virtually defenseless at this point. Cheating pays, and it pays in significant ways for institutions and for coaches and coaching staffs. So there's lots of progress to be made there. I think it would be terrific if the NFL and the NBA approached their developmental process with the same method that Major League Baseball has approached it with. So obviously, we would love a rule that said draft a student out of high school or leave them alone until after their junior year. That train has probably left the station, but the NFL and the NBA have relied absolutely 100% on the colleges and universities for their feeder system. We, as a result, have a lot of young men and women that come to college without a real aspiration for an education, but are there really because it's their only option. And so I think we ought to have another alternative. And I think that there are a number of things that coaches and athletics departments find important. Coaches value access to recruits. They value access to the postseason, and many are highly money motivated. In all frankness, if everybody in the coaching profession was like Bruce Weber, we wouldn't have a lot of these problems because he stands for the right things.
I'll show you in a bit.
And I would say the same thing about Bill Snyder, who I think has done, continues to do. Bill and I served at the University of Iowa for a brief time at the same time, and I continue to believe that the turnaround at Kansas State University is the greatest turnaround in the history of college football. But not everybody is similarly motivated, and to the extent that we have people in our organization that are not, we ought to do things that call them out. And I think those things, we've started down that path with access to the postseason. We had a very highly decorated program that was ineligible for the NCAA basketball tournament, and we need to have more of that. The rules need to be more responsive. They need to be more contemporaneous. We need to tie initial scholarships to graduation rates, and we need to do it in ways that don't allow a coach to do a poor job and leave the campus and go to another place and make more money and do the same thing over again. In short, we need to put our money where our mouth is, and we haven't always done that. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to take it seriously. And the last thing I'll say about changes is, I think we have been less than responsive in terms of what we need to do for student athletes. There is an opportunity. We've made some progress. We haven't made enough. We need to give more voice. We need to give more benefits. We need to be doing some things that are different in light of modern circumstances. And I think we need to do a complete revamp on our recruiting model. We haven't changed it since the 70s, and it, in large measure, doesn't take into account the changes in social media and communication methods and all of those things. Though there's plenty of work to do, but this operation is more than worthy of restoration and keeping it the way it is. And creating, if we go down the path, as John said, of creating an employee-employer relationship with our students, we will have forever lost our way.
So, DeLoss, when the largest budget, built the largest budget, largest success story in all of college athletics at Texas, and yet, when we were working together in the Big 12, we had the smallest budget, you had the largest budget, but we're still working together and finding common ground and bringing value to each other. So in this NCAA model, and the commissioner referenced 65 schools and 285 schools, and I'm asking you this question because you're retired and you can say whatever you want, right? So in this model,
I keep hearing him referred as retiring. I thought, how much longer can he retire?
In this model,
life is good.
In this model, can these compromises and the things that the commissioner talked about, can that happen in this 350 school NCAA Division I model?
Money does not buy victory. We own Texas. Have you heard that? Yeah. Now, my advice, if you do own Texas, you need to spend the winters down there. The athletic model is really good. I agree with everything Bob said. The job we do with first-generation kids is just magnificent. If they came in as a student versus coming in as a student athlete, totally different. In athletics, we take those young people, we spend dollars, we walk them through enrollment, we walk them through studying, we get them tutors, we get them everything they need. And then when we get them up to par, we push them out the door and make them do it on their own like every other student. So what we do with first-generation students, what we do with kids that come in a little short on the academic side, I think is just absolutely wonderful. Now, how we made all that money down there, John, I'm watching you, and you're doing it pretty much how we did it. I think when I left Kansas State, the budget here was $1.8 million. When I got to Texas, I think the budget was $4 million. And today our budget's $170 million. And it took a lot of time. It took a lot of effort. We started first. We had no money to hire coaches at the rate that coaches were being hired, and this is at Texas. And so we decided the first thing we would do would be to generate dollars. So we started a foundation that had been generating $500,000 a year in external foundations and built that to the point today where it's around $37 million a year. So we got the money. The second thing we needed was facilities. So we put our dollars, we put bonded money, we put our efforts into facilities. And that's what I'm seeing. I drove by your stadium yesterday, and I see that's what you're doing, John. I mean, the very same thing. The third thing we saw that we were short on was we were in a conference that all the institutions were in the same state, and recruiting was very difficult because kids like to play on a huge platform. They don't want to play like they were in high school. We played games. If we won all our games, our kids got to go to the Cotton Bowl. And they wanted to go to the Rose Bowl or the Sugar Bowl. They wanted to do something bigger than that. So our third thing was conference. We needed to do something with our conference. Donnie Duncan and I worked a long time with a lot of other people and helped build the Big 12, which I think has been wonderful for Texas. I think it's been wonderful for Kansas State. I think it's been wonderful for all of us in the Big 12. With the money, the facilities, and the conference, we were able to go out and get coaches. We were able to go to the great University of North Carolina and hire their football coach.
That's true. We were winning before you did that.
But when he got there, you weren't.
No, I know. And after he left, we didn't.
Yeah. But we were able to hire terrific coaches, and not just terrific coaches, but great people. And I think that is the basis of what we build our program on, John, and I think that's exactly what you're doing, and I'm proud of you and the president for doing that.
So as we go forward, NCAA, 350 members, 65 to 85 with pretty much different resources, partly because of contracts and television. And so, Commissioner, you chime in on this, and President Schulz and Mr. Skipper and DeLoss, can this thing stick together, the big entity, with so many different needs and opinions and some of the things that you talked about that we need to do for student-athlete welfare that we haven't been able to do? Can the whole thing stick together?
Well, John, I certainly believe it can stick together. You might suspect I'm going to say that because I'm in the middle of us all working together to try and do that. And I think we want it to, because we've got some really positive things that people have talked about. But if we look at one of the premier college sporting events in the country, the NCAA tournament, and everybody filling out brackets and doing family competitions, which I'm winning in our family, and you do those kinds of things, what is it that gets people excited? It's when that 15 seed beats that number 2 seed. That little school beats the big, highly resourced school that they've seen on TV so much. I think Americans like an underdog. So the reason that I think it's important that we make it work is, you know, as much as the 64, 65 schools will just play each other, we need that sense of competition out there and the David versus Goliath kind of stories that I think Americans love and sports bring to us. So I think it's incumbent on the leadership, the presidents, the commissioners, the athletic directors, to really work together to find a way to keep this together. But understand that we got to change some things, that we can't just incrementally do some stuff. We got to do some major changes. So we're going to have a proposal come out in a couple weeks that I think will not address everything, but it's going to address a lot of things. And I think it represents a good, fair, honest effort to make some of the changes that we need to keep this thing together and keep it rolling, but acknowledging that the way we did it maybe the last 30 years isn't the way we got to do it for the next 30.
Yeah, you heard an awful lot of common sense ideas from Mr. Bowlsby here, which I would love to see them adopt. I think that would include, I think, Bob, you've been public at suggesting that full payment for our student athletes would be a good thing, I think. And
cost of attendance.
Yeah, I mean, that really makes sense. And they need to just rationalize things, right? When you hear the stories about the kids who can't go home to see their father who's in the hospital, or you can't bring people into games, it's just got to begin to make more sense. There are rules now that abstractly regulate the game, but they don't seem to make sense. And I mean, it seems to me, Kirk, when these things come out, they've got to make people feel good about this. There's so much that's worthwhile to protect. There actually is something I think could get a little bit of traction, Bob, which is the one and done that you referred to. I mean, I think the one and done feels wrong to people. If we have a system which is about student athletes, and so that the compact is that the student is coming and providing his spectacular athletic talent to play for the university, and the university is providing a 4-year education, full ride, a good experience, a degree at the end of that. That's a great compact. When a kid comes in and plays 1 year and is out the door in February, it's no good. It proves that it's a public display that we don't really have that agreement, that's not what it's about. Now, this has nothing to do. You can't do this. You can't do this. Adam Silver, who's the new commissioner of the NBA, has said he would like to do something about it because it's not good for his league either, the National Basketball Association. We favor this and are going to try to help him do that because it would be, I think that is the most public place where everybody goes, well, gee, if you have this compact where everybody's getting benefit, well, it doesn't look like it doesn't smell right when these kids are coming in and they're really not coming in to go to school.
You mentioned something that I want to ask you about, pro sports versus college sports and the appeal. For me, at least, there's kind of a perception that pro sports is more about individuals and marketable personalities, LeBron James, Peyton Manning, that kind of thing. Is college sports different than that? Is college sports more about team-based rivalries and tradition?
Well, it certainly is by necessity, right? I mean, even if you get 4 and done, which is what I'm for 4 and done, they'll only be here 4 years. So yeah, it's about the jersey here, right? You care about the purple and white, and you care about the Wildcats, and you love the players, and they come back, and you're excited about them. You put them in the Hall of Fame, but by necessity, they're going to be in and out pretty quickly. So it's going to be different. It's going to be about the jersey. College sports is much more tribal, right? The tribes gather on Saturday morning and eat fried chicken. I'm from the South. I think you probably eat fried chicken here in the Midwest. Eat fried chicken and potato salad and drink Dr. Pepper, maybe with something in it, and and that's fun. And I love you know, I love the NBA. I'm a big basketball fan, but it is a little different. It's more of a city thing, right? It's not about just the jersey. It's about LeBron James, and it's about Carmelo Anthony in New York City. It's about the coaches. Of course, it's about the coaches in college as well. They're both wonderful, but the level of passion in college sports is much more, because it's about where you went to school, or where you live on a college campus, or where your son or daughter went, or your mother or father or aunt or uncle. And there's just some kind of connection that I don't think you have the same connection to a professional team.
Pay the players, unionization, those kind of things. Comments?
Well, you heard my comment.
Yes, sir.
And I really do believe that, and I think John articulated it as well. I do want to, while we're talking about NCAA reorganization, though, and while we're here in Manhattan, I want to give President Schulz his due. He has carried a lot of water on behalf of the Big 12 and on behalf of college athletes and athletics nationally. And Kirk, I appreciate it very much. I do think I conned you into it under false pretenses, but it isn't the worst one of those I've ever done. My apologies, but please know that your president is deeply engaged and highly effective and doing a great job.
John, the whole paying the players thing, and you and I have talked about this a lot. You know, today at Kansas State and a lot of other public universities, if we look at the average debt load that an undergraduate student has when they come out, say $25,000, $26,000, $27,000, and then we look and say to when folks are talking about paying players, it's like the scholarship that they get, the full scholarship that a student gets at University of Texas or Kansas State University or something for 4 years. There's an awful lot of our families out there that would love to have an opportunity for their son or daughter or whoever to come to a school and be able to graduate debt-free, have tutoring, and all those other sorts of things. Now, we have great expectations for student athletes, so it's not free. But I think that's missing from the conversation is the value of a scholarship at some great universities that are going to lead them out to a great career. And we just sort of forget that in some of these when people talk about it. And you take some of the private universities out there, take Wake Forest where you went to school, what's a 4-year scholarship they're worth? That's a lot of money. That's an important resource. And I think that's got to continue to be part of the conversation. We talk about what we're doing to help student athletes move through school.
We're gonna work your tail off for 4 years, and then you're gonna reap the benefits for 40 years, and it's very true.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think where the disconnect comes is when it appears that things are happening at a few places where that's not the case. When you read about kids who come out after playing football for 3 years who don't read very well, that's shameful. And I think that raises the question in people's minds. It's not about, it really is not going to make sense to pay the players. But I think that's mostly a reaction to they're being exploited. There's a lot of money involved. And so something's wrong. And paying the players will be one of those things where the unintended consequence will be worse. It'll be a worse cure than the disease, because most places it's not broken. I've never seen a plan that works for paying the players. I don't know how that works. I don't know how I've seen how you can establish the fund. We'll figure out how much money the schools get. We'll put 55% of that in the fund like they do in the NBA, and we'll pay out of that. Well, who are you going to pay? You're going to pay the stars? You're going to pay the walk-ons? You're going to pay the wrestlers? You're going to pay the baseball players? How are you going to pay? Are you going to pay based upon their importance relative to licensing? Well, gee, you really want a system where Johnny Manziel, makes $8 million and his teammates don't make any money? We just published this thing at ESPN that proved that the disparity on pro teams, there's a difference in wins and losses when the disparity in salaries is higher. So if you have a team with people making a lot of money, 8 players who make $20 million and 8 players who make $200,000, that team on balance will perform less than a team that has chemistry because they're all being treated the same. So to me, the discussion about paying players is symptomatic of some highly visible things where something's not right. People are being exploited. There's big money, and how come these kids didn't learn how to read? But again, I know that's not the case here, but to your point, I think, Bob, the NCAA's got to act and put a system in place that feels fair.
Yes.
And it makes me feel very good that you're involved in that. It makes me feel very good to hear you say that, but they got to get that going, because right now there's all this noise in the environment about how unfair it is and how we've got to change something and do something. If you got that situation, you better fix something in a hurry before somebody you don't want to fix it decides that they're going to regulate it. You know, the courts, you know, the NRLB, you know, is going to decide that this is the way we're going to do it, and then we're all going to have a system that doesn't work as well.
DeLoss?
We don't sell ourselves very well either. I'm for cost of education, whatever that is, and Kirk, you can figure that out, and you'll tell us what that is, and we'll pay that bill. I'm for paying them more than what they're. I think at the end of the year, they have money out of pocket that we ought to take care of. We did some research on this, and we found that if a youngster scholarship for 4 years is $100,000, we'd probably put on top of that $150,000 to $200,000 in tutoring, mentoring, and all the things, training room, all the things that we do for that student. So we need to sell that we're doing a better job with our kids than what the public maybe sees that we're doing. And Mr. President, while you're working on all these things for the NCAA, 5 years of eligibility, I like that.
Bob wants freshman ineligibility. You want 5 years of eligibility.
And I'm going to say this because I've already said I'm proud of what we do with first-generation students, but I worry about our academic standards. I worry about our initial eligibility. We bring kids in that can't get the job done, period, and we put pressure on coaches and academic counselors to get them through, and I think that's not good. I worry about our initial eligibility. We have low initial eligibility, and then when it comes to doing continuing eligibility, we set standards there. So you put an athletic director like John is today, put him in a bind because he lets his coaches take kids that can't get through, and then he turns around and puts rules on them where their continuing eligibility has to meet certain standards like the APR. So I'm strong for initial eligibility being raised some.
I would just comment that one of the things the president talks about is telling the story better and allowing people inside. And just not to pick on you, but one of the things you mentioned that we haven't done a very good job of telling the story of is when a student athlete does have a ill relative or whatever. In fact, I was on a flight right out of Manhattan to Chicago with one of our student athletes on Wednesday last week, who was flying home overseas for a funeral and then right back to compete, and we were paying for that transport.
Yeah.
So.
We want to tell those stories. You guys see it on College Game Day. You know, Tom Rinaldi tells the stories of teams that form bonds around kids who are sick or form bonds and do things in the community. After Katrina, there were a lot of college athletes who did a lot of things down in New Orleans that we showed. There are so many good stories, and the preponderance, I agree with DeLoss, the preponderance of good relative to abuse is very, very high, but it's still, those things are a problem for all of us, and just as if the preponderance of things are good about ESPN, but we got some problems, we have to take care of them. We have to fix those, and I think it requires that we do so.
Agreed. So, John Skipper, stepping back to ESPN, and we've seen extraordinary growth and change, obviously in the entire entity of the lifetime of the company. You know, an accelerating pace of change, and now we're watching our television on ESPN, on Watch ESPN and ESPN Go and all that type of stuff. You know, kind of what's next, and then what are the challenges that you feel as president of ESPN going forward?
The most difficult challenge we face is just adapting to new technology and the new way people watch video. Our company has been completely, I wasn't there, but in 1979 when the company started, it was exactly concurrent with the start of cable television, pay television. So for many, many years, all of the video that you wanted to watch, you bought a pay television subscription for $35, $45, and you got everything you need to watch. Now that world is changing, and there's so much more video available on other places, predominantly the internet for free. YouTube, there's a video available on Netflix. You don't need a pay television sub. You want to watch television where it used to be in the living room. Now you want to watch it everywhere. When we did the World Cup in 2010, 1 out of every 3 people viewing was watching on something other than a television. We're watching, and that happened because the games were during the day, so people were watching at work on their desktop. This is where we learned it's really helpful for your career. that it is helpful for our careers, by the way. We get to watch all the time. But that's kind of what we got to deal with, is sort of navigate those waters and figure out how we can serve fans, get them all the content they want all the time, live within the pay television universe, but also provide content other places because people want to watch other places. In terms of what's going to happen, mobile is the dramatic change right now in technology. Mobile devices are now more important than desktop computer devices. People consume more content on them. And we got to kind of figure out the advertising model is hard there because it's a little device, and the traditional deal between fans and broadcasters and universities and advertisers has been, hey, we'll bring you the game. We're not going to charge you more for the game, but you have to stop every now and then, watch a 30-second commercial. The advertisers like it because you can see it. It's hard on a little device. The other change that's going to happen is just going to be the continued proliferation of more games. I think it was Bob who made the point that people worried that, gee, you would satiate the desire for sports by putting all this content on. People wouldn't come to stadiums. That they wouldn't watch all these games. This year we'll do 35,000 live hours of television. About half of that's games and half of that's studio. Well, if you do the math, that's a little bit under 4 hours a day. Among other things, it means if I sit up here for an hour, I'm behind 4 more hours in my job. But that's how much content we do now, and that's going to go up. It's going to go up to 50, 75. We were with some of the journalism communication students today. I don't think it's within this decade, I think. So before 2020, at every major university, all of your sports are going to be available on what I would call television. We don't even use the word television anymore, or try not to. We just call them screens. So because the production technology is becoming less expensive, because everybody has a smartphone in their pocket, because you can put robotic cameras on tennis courts and in natatoriums, we ought to be able to get all the wrestling matches up because people want to see those. And our growth has come because we provide more and more content for more and more groups of sports fans. My son went to Davidson College, and I'll never forget the experience. This is about 4 years ago. He was there contemporaneous with Steph Currie, and he wanted to watch the Southern Conference tournament, so I did a deal. I didn't use any public money, and the shareholders know all about it, where we did the Southern Conference tournaments on ESPN on a tablet, and he got to watch all of his Davidson games. Fans are fans. Fans of Poughkeepsie want to see their Poughkeepsie team play, and we're going to try to show them that. So there's never been more technological change than there is right now. I mean, things are happening at a very, very fast rate, and our goal here is to keep up with them, keep up with all that as much as we can.
Now, tell me, as a college kid, is there anything cooler than having your dad put on your conference tournament? There's nothing cooler than that.
Having your dad as a university president is much cooler. Trust me.
I do. I have sons 28, 24, and I've never really had the issue where they had that moment where they rejected me and went away, and I realize it's because my tickets are great. my sons call every now and then because they can't call every time about tickets, so my sons will call me and they'll say, "Dad, how are you doing?" I'm doing great. Why'd you call? "Oh, I'm just calling to see how you're doing." I go, "Tomorrow, I'm going to get a call, and they're going to want to go to the Eastern Regional Final." I don't mind. Every parent here knows any way you can stay connected to your children is a good way.
I'm just happy to learn that my son might one day want to reacquaint with me.
Oh, he's going to, yeah.
He's 13 now, so I got 5 years to go here?
Yeah.
All right, so we're talking about going to games, right? And there's concern about the experience at home is pretty good. Big screen television, you make it good. You got all those camera angles and all that kind of stuff. But I would imagine if you're televising sports,
we want a crowd.
You want a crowd. You want atmosphere. You want K-State with 13 consecutive sellouts in football or the Octagon of Doom. You want that. So how do we balance that out?
I don't think there's any substitute for the live experience. I mean, it's not more fun. We care about how many people watch on television. People ask me, I pull for Nielsen. That's who I pull for in every game. I want their score to be as high as possible. The live experience is fabulous. Now, we talked a minute today, John. I mean, one thing is the NBA's done a good job of this, is People now demand experience at the arena, at the stadium. We went to a game and we were fine, sitting still during timeouts and watching scores from the rest of the conference come across the board. Kids now are not going to stand for that. They're going to want to be on their tablets. They're going to bring them to the games. They're going to want to be able to get other scores. They're going to be able to watch other things. So you're going to have to wire your stadiums because they have to have that experience. But it's still a great experience. When teams are winning, they sell all their games out. When fans have a good time and you take care, again, it's customer service, right? You see a lot of places now where you can order from your tablet your Coke and your hamburger and it comes to your seat. You're going to have to do better customer service, wire the stadiums. And I'll tell you a terrible one, and this is completely self-interested. They're always there when you're playing somebody good. I know you want to bring a couple of guys in you can beat up on. That's the games that nobody shows up for. Now, I know it's self-serving, but there you get. And I had this same conversation today with the journalism students. The hard part is the rule of 500. When everybody plays and you add them all up, it's 500. But big conferences try to game the system by playing 4 teams they can beat, 8 teams in the conference. They go 4-4 in the conference, and they're 8-4 and go to a bowl. We cause some of that trouble because we have 35 bowls. So I got that. And where's Coach Weber? You want to get some W's. It's also good for team chemistry, and there's a lot of things. I'm having some fun, but we are pushing for, and it's not as big a problem in a basketball arena as trying to fill up. And you guys were smart and stayed at 50,000. A lot of schools get beyond where they can naturally fill up their stadium, and that's a problem.
That's exactly the truth. We went to 100, and we could go to 115, and we absolutely will not do that. I think, John, the decision to stay at 50 is right.
Yep.
People want amenities. They want suites, club seats. They want to be able to move from their seat to a club. We have waiting lists at Texas for those amenities. We don't have waiting lists for seats.
Yeah. Bob did one of the smartest things I've ever seen. It's counterintuitive. You at Stanford took your stadium down. Mm-hmm. I forget, what was the capacity, Bob? You took
it was 85,000. We went to 50, and also did just what you said. We fully Wi-Fi'd all of our venues, and it made a significant difference.
Yeah.
But I think the other part is information flow. I mean, we talk about a tablet or device, but if I'm at home or anywhere else watching a modern telecast and somebody runs for a certain number of yards or scores another point, that's immediately all these statistics and stuff up there. It's harder to do that in a game time environment because we don't have all those screens and some of that kind of stuff up there. So I think our fan base have become more sophisticated in the kind of information that they're expecting to see right there. And so we got the amenities in the stadium, and it's neat to be in a live environment. And I think it's not just wiring, it's also how they're going to get that content and information so that the game day experience becomes better than sitting at home with a bunch of buddies watching your team play on television. And
That's
I think
not bad, though. Don't run that down too much.
Well, yeah.
We have 375 televisions in the new West Stadium Center,
Okay.
so there's plenty of opportunity to do both.
And maybe your TV partner could provide you some of that good content that everybody gets on a tablet in the stadium.
Yeah.
In just a few moments, I know we'll have some microphones on either side of the auditorium, and we'd love to have some questions from the audience. And Dr. Mason will come up and moderate those questions in just a second. I do want to ask one more thing, Mr. Skipper. So one of the things that has been talked about by some is decoupling cable and unbundling cable. And is that something that is likely, unlikely? What's your opinion on all that?
When people talk about that, they usually mean a la carte. And
A la
people
carte
will
cable,
simply be able to look at a list of stations and pick the stations they want and pay whatever that costs, and everybody will be happy. There's almost no chance that will happen. And it just doesn't, sorry. The ESPN will be fine in that scenario, but you'll pay $19.95 a month for it. And you'll add up the 12 stations that you want, and you're going to find out you're paying the same thing you pay to get 150. The current system works beautifully, and it helps keep a lot of stations in business who would go out of business. The art stations would go out of business. Many of the ethnic stations would go out of business, and you would be left with significantly less choice, and we would be forced to raise our price for those people who really want ESPN. So it is not likely that those great big companies, Comcast and DirecTV and ESPN and NBC and CBS and Viacom and NBC, are likely to figure out a system where the amount of money that goes into it declines. So I don't think it has very much chance of happening at all. What is going to happen, we just did a deal with Dish where we're going to do a service where people can get a personal subscription service which only comes to your over broadband to one device, a tablet. And so you don't want, if you're a millennial and you don't want to buy a television subscription but you want to get a smaller package, we're going to provide alternatives. But most people in this country, there are 118 million households in this country, about 115 million of them have television of some sort. There's 3 million households that don't, and about 100 of those 115 pay for television. The other 15 still rely upon an over-the-air signal. I don't think that's going to change very much. And by the way, having traveled the rest of the world, we have by far the best television in the world. The last thing you want to do is sit in a hotel room in most countries in the world and flip around and see there's 17 stations and 9 of them are owned by the government. And it's not that exciting. And so I just don't think it would work into a better system. Having said that, you heard me say our mission is to serve sports fans, so we are looking for alternative ways. It does us no good. Companies lose their way when they are defensive and won't make changes. We just have to make changes. We're a division of a public company. We are required to grow and return value to shareholders. That's what we do, literally.
Moderator Currie and our panel, I think we owe you for this very engaging conversation. And now we want to turn it over to the audience. We have microphones on both sides of the auditorium. And if you have a question for one of our panelists, if you would start making your way to the microphone. I'll start as people make their way. Maybe not a question, but an observation as the Super Bowl got closer. Many of you know I'm a nutrition professional. I heard that weight gain went up after a particular team lost, if you were a fan. And as a Broncos fan, that gave me a lot of concern after the game there. But we want you to engage with our panelists here. So I'm going to see if I can see you. Why don't we start over here to my right?
And April, if you would just, Dr. Mason, if you just have each question asker identify themselves.
Please, thank you.
Sure. Tyler Kai, I'm a graduate student. My question is to the entire panel. And it goes back into the lines of scholarships. You talked a lot about how we value scholarships, but how do we get student athletes to value a scholarship?
Well, I'll start out. I think the vast majority of student athletes do value the scholarship. I think lost in the labors, it's rigorous. The life of a Division I student athlete particularly is not for the faint of heart. It is a lot of long days. I saw it up close and personal at Stanford, where it was a very rigorous academic environment as well as a highly competitive athletic environment. And I think the same thing is true at Texas and at Kansas State. And at most institutions, it is a lot of work. It's hard. And most kids look back after 4 years and say, gosh, I just can't believe I did it. I committed myself. I pulled myself up by the bootstraps when I needed to, and I put one foot in front of the other a lot of days and fell into bed at night exhausted. But in the end, they have the benefit of a college education that is going to pay dividends for every day of their life. And if they happen to have the success that might allow them to go on and play beyond college, either professionally or on an international basis or on some other basis, that's a wonderful byproduct. But I think our student athletes generally, when they have a chance to reflect on it, will almost universally indicate that they had an experience in college that most of their friends that weren't student athletes envied. And I think that perhaps it takes a retrospective to know that. And I think perhaps we don't always do the best job we could of having that conversation. As an example, I think many student athletes don't realize the role that voluntary contributions play in funding their scholarships. And there's for every dollar that goes to tuition and fees and room, board, and books, there's a donor in Riley, Kansas, who sacrificed to help make that possible. And so I think we probably need to have that conversation. But I think most student athletes recognize that they are very fortunate to have the kind of experience they have while they're here, and very fortunate to be able to reap the benefits of that experience for the rest of their life.
I sat in my chair 35 years, and what I found out is that 10 years later, 15 years later, guys, gals come back to my office with their husband or their wife, with their kids, and say thank you. And you're looking at someone sitting here that could not have gone to college without a scholarship. So I think those of us who have done it appreciate it. And sometimes it takes a little longer, but in the end, they all appreciate it.
On this side, please.
How much time do we have?
I think no. No, look, I think it's imperative that the institutions get their own house in order. I don't know what the sentiment would be in this audience. I would hope that the Congress has really important things to do and they would get to doing them. And I don't know that I'm a business person. I don't know that having Congress try to strike the bargain is the way to go. I would not be in favor of that. I would be afraid that our cure would be worse than the disease. And I don't mean that. I'm not cynical about government. I know there's a lot of cynicism in this country about government now. I'm not cynical about that. I don't think it behooves the federal government to step in here and create the grand bargain. I hope that the NCAA and the university presidents and athletic directors can strike that bargain.
Yeah, I don't know where it would ever stop if we once went down that path. Somehow, KStateathletics.gov just doesn't resonate.
So you're not disagreeing.
Next question over here, and if you'd identify yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Justin Mainzer, a political science major. I'm a junior. I actually want to thank ESPN because I wouldn't have been here. I'm actually from New York, and thanks to them televising all the games, K-State games, I never heard of K-State, never would have been here and met this amazing family over here. But I did want to ask a separate question. Just a separate question. Should there be revenue sharing between the conferences to make smaller conferences have a better chance at winning national championships?
I'm not personally in favor of that, as you might imagine. Now, if the University of Texas wants to share some of their revenue some more, we'll be happy to take it. But no, I think you also have to look at these different athletic budgets and where the dollars come from. And we have a lot of K-State folks in the audience that help make our facilities and all those kind of things possible through donations, through buying tickets, through being there. And I'm not sure that it's appropriate that we take people that are supporting our team, take a cut of that money and send it off to schools elsewhere. So I just personally don't think that's a good model. I don't think it's a good idea. I do think within conferences, revenue sharing makes a lot of sense, and the Big 12 put that in place. And I think it goes back to the teammate thing. I think if all the schools are sort of getting the same kind of dollar figure from the conference, what that does is that kind of makes everybody feel equal. and I think that's made a big difference in us feeling good about our future. But I'm adamantly opposed to that.
There's another way to spend that money if you've got too much, and that's to give it back to the university. And at Texas, we gave back $10 million a year to the university, and the president talked to me before I retired and asked that we fund $50 million of an engineering building, and we agreed to do that. So that's a better way to share the revenue in my mind.
Thank you.
On this side, please.
I'm Matt. I'm a sophomore here. Mr. Skipper, this is mostly just for you. As you're well aware, I'm sure that ESPN is a huge part of the Walt Disney Company and their profits, and I'm sure you've had this conversation with Mr. Iger a million times already. But how do you see ESPN competing with the Comcasts, the Foxes, the Viacoms for all these media rights that keep going up and up beyond just cutting a bigger check every single time?
Well, I appreciate your concern for us. And the most important thing you can do is watch more. Look, it's funny. ESPN launched a 24/7 cable network in 1979, and NBC launched one in 2012, and Fox launched one in 2013. And I'm always astonished that people ask me, how are you going to deal with these competitors? When the question is, how are they going to deal with us? Right? We hold more rights. I think Bob alluded to it. We hold more rights to more national games than all of the other sports entities combined, cable or broadcast. We have long-term agreements with the affiliates, with our distributors that provide us with revenues significantly in excess of anybody else. We have relationships with advertisers. We have 7,000 unbelievable employees who care about doing a great job and serving fans. We have the most technologically advanced studios in the world. We're opening up another 190,000 square feet of studios on May the 26th of this year. Our goal is to be overwhelming to our competition. We started 80 new shows or new businesses since January of 2013. In the last 15 months, we've started 80 new things. We launched 538, which is Nate Silver's site, a couple of weeks ago. We launched a new football show with Colin Coward last year on Sunday. We launched Grantland a couple of years ago. We launched ESPNW for women sports fans a few years ago. We do more women's college games than all other sports entities together do games. And talk about another place that's going to grow. We are by far the largest supporter of women's sports. We think women's sports are increasingly important. We're doing the women's tournament right now, and it's just been fabulous. I'm mad at Bob because Stanford beat North Carolina last night. I thought that was unsporting. We were visiting, and you whooped us. But we love women's sports and think women's sports fans. We think about Hispanic sports fans and what they care about, which is why we bought the rights to the Mexican national team for the next 8 years, because that's what many Hispanic Americans care about. It's the Mexican national team. That's a good thing, and we like being in a relationship with the Mexican national team. So we think we can compete okay. I have employees internally, and I say, get up every day, look in the mirror, and say, would you rather be us competing with them or them competing with us? And as long as the answer is you'd rather be us, then we're okay. Which doesn't mean by the way, if any of that comes off as arrogant, I apologize. We want to be appropriately proud of what we do and feel good about what we do, but we never take anything complacently. When Fox started their new network on August the 18th, 2013, that'll show you that I was paying attention. We launched more new shows in the month of August than they had shows because we respect the fact that you have to continue to compete. And so I appreciate your asking. Please watch more ESPN, and I think we'll be okay.
Aaron Neely, Jr. in Communications and avid ESPN watcher. My question for you is, and I know the answer already, but how big of a correlation is there between success on the field or court or anything like that and enrollment, and just in general, not with just athletes, but in general with all students?
There is a fairly significant correlation. I mean, and of course, it's not the most important, and by it's somewhat transitory. And by the way, it can only happen if it's if the school is already there, right? One of my sons went to Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt began to have some success on the football field, and their applications went to an all-time high. Louisville, the athletic director there, Tom Jerdich, will tell you that Louisville has put themselves on the map by creating quality sports teams. But again, they have to have the underlying quality of the institution, a dedication to facilities and teaching, and be there. You're not getting anybody to come to difficult institutions because they play football well. You need both, but I don't think anybody will quarrel with the fact that successful athletics leads to more applications.
Thank you.
Please.
You had the fellow from New York who came out to Manhattan, Kansas because he saw it on television. But I like the story that you met some family here. I don't know what that was about, but that certainly sounded lovely. So I'm glad we were able to provide that public service. I told you it was public affairs.
My name's Maddie, and I'm a political science pre-law major right now. My question is mostly for Mr. Skipper. So you say that, sorry. You say that you're for the for and done and not so much the one and done, and I agree with that, but you're not for paying athletes, and I also agree with that. But wouldn't paying student athletes motivate students to stay in school and get an education instead of doing the one and done and going to the NBA or NFL?
Well, there you're talking about actually a small number of student athletes, right? You're really talking about a handful of basketball players who have a realistic chance to play in the NBA. So it wouldn't proportionally paying tens of thousands of students for those 15, 20, 25, I don't think would be the right way to go. I'll tell you an interesting thing I read the other day is, though that does happen, they interviewed kids, this is men, not women. Women are less deluded than men. They interviewed men who play Division III college basketball and asked them, how many of you think you have a chance to play in the NBA? And the answer was 70%. You know how many Division III players there are in the NBA right now? I think there is one or two. And I think that we've got to get to a place where people have a better understanding. You were talking about selling the value of the scholarship, somebody asked. I think the universities also have the responsibility, and the coaches have the responsibility. I now know where you're sitting, Coach Weber, so I know you feel that, right? You have to give a realistic assessment. Many people do not. You know that many of your colleagues do not, and that's a disservice. And I think, again, I'm back to your question, though. I think the cure is, once again, harder than the ailment there if you were to pay all the athletes. So thank you.
Thanks.
And as Coach Weber knows, 100% of his guys think they're going to the NBA.
We got
do.
several right up here. You could ask them. You going, Justin?
You probably have a couple who have a chance playing big-time basketball.
Good evening. My name is Ted Nagurney. I'm in the Department of History as a graduate student. I was wondering if you could provide the panel your thoughts on Tier 1, 2, and 3 TV rights, internet rights, etc., since we have 3 great examples of each of those rights in action between ESPN, the Longhorn Network, and K-State HD.TV, and how those might evolve with high-speed internet access. And then for Mr. Skipper as well, what is ESPN's position on net neutrality and the issues involving telecoms in those respects?
Anybody want
For you, I believe.
Look, I think I've just had a chance to learn a little bit today about K-State HD TV, so I intend to get a little look at it. I think I think it's a good thing when more and more of your events are available to people who care. And in many of those cases, it will be family, friends, and that's a great thing. If we can get inexpensive production or student production and get up on a broadband connection, a wrestling match, that's a great thing. And I'm all for it. I think that we at ESPN, and this will not surprise anybody, our intention is to go deeper and deeper into the rights and do more and more of it ourselves. We have a broadband service called ESPN 3, on which this year we'll do over 5,000 games. Our goal is to do 20,000 events. So we think there's good business in getting more of that content on. Net neutrality, I work for the Walt Disney Company. We've not had a significant public stance on net neutrality. I think it's an interesting issue. I think it gets confused sometimes in people's minds. I think it is necessary that the internet be open and available, and that all people have the opportunity to put content up and have it viewed at high speeds. I think you have an issue when you have several companies which use enormous amounts of bandwidth and create enormous businesses. Netflix and YouTube right now are about half of the broadband consumed, and they are competing with companies. I'm not involved in this. We don't worry about net neutrality for ESPN. We will get carriage. But if I'm Comcast and Sony creates an over-the-top service and they're competing with me for my pay TV service and they're riding free on all of the infrastructure, which I spent billions of dollars to build, there's something not quite right about that. I don't know why they, as long as in this case, it might be appropriate to have Congress involved. As long as there is open access for all the things that people are doing, I don't see any reason there couldn't be business deals for very large companies. I don't know that we need net neutrality to protect Netflix's right to make lots of money.
I think we'll have our last question from over here.
Hi, Paul Ohm, Manhattan, Kansas. I'm a huge fan of college athletics. I don't know if anybody's an alumni of the Kansas City Chiefs or any of that here, so I focus on the college scene. And every year we talk about all the selection process in basketball and football, and we're analyzing conferences versus other teams. And what I was wondering is, in basketball at least, we used to have a lot of interconference games throughout the basketball season. Now we have our pre-conference season, and then it's a conference grind. And for our team, it's 18 games. And I would like to see some kind of mid-season break in both football and basketball where you take 2 weeks and you have an off week, and then you're playing a team from another conference. And a lot of teams change over the course of a season. You can't judge that in the first half of the – so this is a question for everybody. Is that possible that can come back? Because I think it would go a long way to deciding who are the Final Four in football now, which needs to be 8. And then who gets invited to the big dance in basketball, because it's a great water cooler topic, and enjoy all the shows, but it seems like around here we all see as a focus on East Coast and the SEC in particular in football. So.
Well, I agree with you that there's too damn much SEC on there. Actually, one of the things that we've implemented in the last year was a Big 12 SEC challenge, and which we, by the way, won 7 out of 10 games this year. But we've had some conversations about when the optimal time to play it is, and if we could find a window later in the season where we could do it and have some real focus on our 2 conferences, we certainly would try and do that, and we're looking at some ways to do it. I think that over the long haul, the football playoff will have a positive effect on non-conference scheduling, and whether or not that means that there's a window in the middle of the season is yet to be determined. Some conferences allow games after the 4th playing date. We don't do a whole lot of that if we can avoid it, just because this conference schedule is difficult. And most of the leagues that I've been affiliated with are similarly disposed to it. But the fact is, the months of October and November are the greatest regular season in all of sports. The month of September, not quite so good. And as John mentioned, they would be better off. I think the enterprise would be better off if we had more pivotal matchups early in the year. And then the other piece of that is you got to be able to play those big games and lose and still get in the hunt for the postseason playoff games. And so, I think that the all of that is well and good, but it sometimes cuts across some of the other things that we commit ourselves to. I mean, it isn't just about trying to determine the fairest champion. As an example, your comment about the 8-team playoff. If you begin to move to 8 teams, to 12 teams, to 16 teams, we aren't going to play games past the end of the first week in January. It's just too disruptive and too much travel and too much craziness. And so that means that some years you're going to see the Rose Bowl and the Cotton Bowl played the middle of December. Because if those games are going to be part of that playoff, you're going to have a week 1 set of games, a week 2 set of games. There are more lucrative models than the one we've adopted. Having even if you stay with 3 games and have it completely outside the bowl system, it's much more valuable. But it doesn't value the traditional role that the bowl games have had in the postseason and in college athletics. And so the 4-game playoff is a compromise. John wishes he had more inventory in that playoff series, and we wish we could sell it to him and make more money. But we're not optimizing the money in the postseason playoff, but we're taking a big step forward to determining a fairer national championship that's determined on the field, and we think it's a huge step, and I think it also is going to take back New Year's Eve and New Year's Day for college football, and I think that's a wonderful thing too. But it's a good example of the kinds of compromises we're called upon to make. We're balancing student-athlete experience. We're balancing family travel. This is a hard format to have families have to travel 2 weeks in a row to go to the semifinal and the final. Imagine what it would be like if you wanted to follow your son for 3 weeks in a row. Who can afford to do that? So an awful lot of what we do involves compromise, and that compromise almost always involves our media partners. And so I think that there's, as I said earlier, there's a lot right about how college athletics fits within higher education. Can we make it better? Absolutely. And I have utmost confidence in President Schulz, but I think he probably knows after getting involved in this crazy business, and I can certainly tell you that we have every possibility of making it worse if we're not careful. So we need to be mindful that there are unintended consequences, and we need to be very thoughtful about what the future holds in store. And so anyway, I hope that addresses your question.
You give the new system one year chance anyway. People are going to love the new college football playoff. To Bob's point, there's 3 games on New Year's Eve, 3 games on New Year's Day. I mean, it's going to be a fabulous experience to be able to bring in the new year with 3 games, and then play a championship a few days later. It's really going to be fun.
Oh, when we get an ESPN KC, I was just curious.
For each of our panelists, any final words you'd like to leave our audience with this evening? DeLoss, do you want to start?
This is a great place. You're all very fortunate to live here. We loved our time here. Congratulations on the great wins in football and basketball. And John, you and Kirk are the best people that I know to be at Kansas State doing the job that they're doing.
I want to echo those comments and thank you very much for allowing me to be a part of the evening. I like having an official role at Kansas State. I interviewed to be the athletic director here at one time, and I think I would have been like the 4th one of those 9 in between, somewhere in there. I was devastated that I didn't get the job, and now that I come here and find so many nice people, it makes me regret it even more. Thank you for having me.
So you do me a great honor to have me here for the Alf Landon Lecture, and I appreciate the hospitality. It's been unbelievably warm. I flew in today and have met a bunch of folks. Everybody's been great to me. I've had a wonderful time. We appreciate the relationship we have with the school. I've been particularly like to thank John Jackie Hartman and President Schulz here for the warm welcome I've had, and please invite me back. I've had a wonderful time. I haven't seen enough. So have me back for a football or basketball game.
You were invited back on September 18th when Kansas State hosts Auburn on ESPN on Thursday night.
We look forward to that. Thank you.
Well, I'd certainly like to take this opportunity to thank Shelley Broccolo and Jackie Hartman, who do an awful lot of the behind-the-scenes work, and we just kind of parade around and they make it all work. So please, a round of applause for those two folks. Thank you. I've got two goals. K-State 2025, top 50 public research university. All our faculty and staff be disappointed if I didn't at least mention that once. And the second thing is college game day. We got to get that back here in Manhattan. So anyway, let's go Cats. Thank you.
John Currie, any last comments?
Well, again, thank you to all the panelists. Commissioner Bowlsby is chairing the committee that's hosting the Final Four over the next several days. And obviously, DeLoss, it's a pleasure to have you and Mary Ann back. And Mr. Skipper, it's a pleasure. And President Schulz, thanks for hiring me almost 5 years ago. Thank you.
You're welcome.